Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Outdoor Florida webinar. This month, we are focusing on the East Coast Greenway, and we'll be hearing from Robert Bartow, who is the Florida coordinator. At the end of Robert's presentation, we're going to have a Q&A portion, so if you could please hold all your questions until then, or if you'd like to write them in the chat. So Robert, if you'd like to take it away.
All right, good morning. Thank you, Katie. Thanks everyone for being here today and coming to listen to me talk. My name is Robert Bartow. I am the Florida coordinator for the East Coast Greenway Alliance. And with that, let's get started. All right, so for those of you that may not know, I'm going to give sort of an overview of the East Coast Greenway as a route, an organization. The East Coast Greenway Alliance is our group that works to promote and create this vision of this trail. And then I'm going to get into some specific details about the state of Florida and some highlights from this past year and some stuff we're looking forward to in the coming years and beyond. So for those that haven't heard me speak before or don't know too much about the East Coast Greenway or our work in the nation, we are a 3,000-mile biking and walking trail along the east coast of the United States, all the way from the Canadian border in Maine to the southernmost point of the US in Key West, Florida. And the East Coast Greenway Alliance has been around since the early 90s as a vision to connect cities along the East Coast. It started originally from Boston to New York, and as more planners and people got excited and working together to create it, the vision for it grew and grew until it encompassed the entire East Coast of the country. And the goal really is to create accessible space for everyone, to connect people to place everywhere in the country. Obviously, a route so long, 3,000 miles, there's a huge variety and diversity of the kind of environments and the people that are along the route. We've got everything, you know, we like to say from the moose to the manatee, or if you prefer desserts, from the best blueberry pie all the way to the best key lime pie. So it's really an incredible vision, incredible goal to make this trail. And it's all about bringing people together. That's really what it's about. So how do we achieve this? The East Coast Greenway Alliance headquarters is based in Durham, North Carolina, and then we have 8 regional staff throughout the route in different regions. And we work with local, state, national agencies and organizations to help advocate, plan, and promote the development and stewardship of this trail. Some more quick facts here. As I mentioned, from Maine to Florida, the East Coast Greenway entire route is 3,000 miles. I should add that only about a third of that right now is protected, completed trail. That's about 1,000 miles that are completely off the road for pedestrians and cyclists only. And I should also mention, it's not just cyclists and walkers, but also people with wheelchairs, people with strollers, rollerbladers. We have several horse trails on the route, but really just a place where people can get away from motor vehicles and enjoy the outdoors and recreation and transportation safely. So 3,000 miles is the route. It goes through 15 states plus Washington, D.C., passing through 450 communities and counting each individual segment as a cohesive whole. In 2021, the East Coast Greenway had 50 million annual visits, rides, runs, and walks, which actually makes it the most visited park in the entire country, which is pretty incredible. It shows there's a huge desire and need for this trail and this kind of work. And really, the more that's built, the more that it gets used. So it's really an incredible amenity for the communities it passes through, and it's really an asset to everywhere on the route. Kind of along those lines, the COVID pandemic obviously changed a lot of things for everyone, but in some ways there was a silver lining in that more people got outside and were using the trails than ever before. Our 2022 annual report will be coming out in the next few months as we reach the end of the year. But for last year, 2021, it really was a banner year for the Alliance in a lot of different ways. We had 17 known through riders, which set a new high. And actually this past year, I'll talk more about later in the presentation, we had our first ever through runner. So for those of you that don't know, a through rider, a through runner is someone that does the entire 3,000 miles of the route all in a continuous trip. And it's really an incredible journey. Obviously, not everyone has the ability or the time to do that, but it really helps shine a light on the organization and the goal as a whole, both the successes and areas where more work is needed. So we always like to lift up our through riders, some really incredible people and incredible stories that have gone through the trail. But as I mentioned, I'll talk some more about two of those through trekkers in particular later in the presentation. It was also our 30th anniversary last year. We had our highest ever public investment, which was amazing. It helped us both from the federal government, local states, municipalities, private fundraising to get more of this trail built out. And we had our New York City to Philadelphia ride, an annual fundraiser, which was a huge success. We did it again this year in 2022 and had a great turnout, and it was a really great event, and look forward to more events and fun rides like that in the future. We've tried a lot of different things in the past, and we've gotten a lot of good reception from some of our events like that. We also put nearly 700 miles of new route signage, and I especially want to mention that in Florida because if anyone on the call knows of areas in where they live where the route passes that either doesn't have signage or the signs are in need of repair, please contact me after this presentation one-on-one. I'll provide my contact information at the end, and I want to work with you to either get new signs up or to replace the ones that need to be fixed. We want to get the route completely signed. It helps with wayfinding, it helps with branding, it helps people that are doing both the entire route, but also just individual sections. And so that's a big priority of ours going forward. So zooming in to Florida, our state, my home state. I am a native Floridian. I was born in Pensacola. My father was in the Navy, so we moved around a lot, but I've lived in Florida all over the state more than anywhere else, and it's definitely where I call home. Florida is the single largest state on the East Coast Greenway route. It is nearly 600 miles, as well as an additional 250 miles for our complementary route. That is the St. Johns River to Sea Loop, which you can see here on the map. It goes inland from St. Augustine down to Titusville, over to Barry, and then up to Palatka. And what's great about Florida, it passes through 13 counties, and it's kind of a microcosm of the entire trail because there's so much variety and diversity of landscapes and areas you pass through. I personally am based in Central Florida, pretty close to this dot that says Melbourne on the map. So I live in the Space Coast where we have rocket launches almost every week now, but you pass through modern, sprawling, huge cities with a lot of urban activity and things going on, but also pristine wilderness. There's beaches, there's springs, the ocean, rivers, nature, and cities. It really is a taste of everything, and it's an incredible route. There's a lot of great individual trails and communities in Florida, and I'm really excited to be in this role and be able to work across the entire state. And one other thing I just want to mention before we go any further, obviously, one of the downsides of living in Florida is that we have to deal with the effects of hurricanes. And I want my heart to go out to everyone that's in Southwest Florida and elsewhere across the state who were affected and still recovering for the storm. I hope everyone is safe and made it out okay. For the East Coast Greenway specifically, our route did take some damage. There was a lot of flooding in Key West proper, and I'm not exactly sure of the state of the Overseas Heritage Trail. I think it made it out okay. But I do know in Daytona Beach, actually, there was a section of the trail, the Sweetheart Trail, that is designated a boardwalk that took significant damage. So I hope everyone's okay and is doing all right after Hurricane Ian. And if anyone knows of any areas of the storm that need repair or are still flooded, please let me know, and we will work with the authorities and the municipalities to let us know about that and also hopefully get it repaired. So moving on, I wanted to share some highlights from this past year, 2022. It really was an incredible year. I also should mention it was my first year with the Greenway. I started just in January of this year, and it's been incredible so far. Just the partnerships that we've made, the team that we work with to promote this amazing trail. So actually, this is only my first or second week on the job, but one of our newest segments of trail designated, the Indian Hills Recreation Area in Fort Pierce in St. Lucie County. This was a beautiful concrete trail. You can see in the picture there, it has a water feature. It goes by the water. It's a mile long, so it doesn't sound like that much, but what's really incredible about this trail is that it is just phase one of a vision that goes back more than a decade to get the East Coast Greenway built in St. Lucie County. And it took the work of a lot of different partners, the Florida Department of Transportation Sun Trail Program, the St. Lucie TPO, Transportation Planning Organization, and of course the county and city, and a lot of other advocates really had this dream and this idea for this trail vision. And this year, finally, this phase one of this network was built out, and actually there's construction plans in the next 5 years for basically the entire county to be connected with a continuous trail. This picture here, this is from the Florida Department of Transportation, showing their Sun Trail program map. And again, it's just really incredible. It starts with this single area, but connecting all the way down to the Savannah's Preserve State Park and the existing Savannah River Greenway. Just an amazing example of what can be done when partners and planning all comes together to make this happen. So I want to give a shout out to all of the project partners who make this work possible, and really excited about St. Lucie County and Fort Pierce and the developments that will continue. So definitely in the coming years, look for more designations and more activity in this area. Moving on, our second designation that we had in Florida this year, also in January, early in the year, the St. Johns River to Sea Loop, which, as I mentioned, is our complementary route that runs inland. And the St. Johns River to Sea Loop Alliance is a great partner of the Greenway. The West DeBary connector was a 3-mile gap that was closed and completed and designated earlier this year. The entire St. Johns River to Sea Loop is about 260 miles long, and every gap that's filled makes it closer to being finished and helps extend this loop. So actually with the completion of this 3-mile segment, it actually is now possible to ride from Titusville or Edgewater all the way to DeLand's Lake Beresford Park completely on a trail, protected from traffic. That's about 51 continuous paved miles of trail in Volusia County. So it passes through several state parks as well as springs, and you can also go to the beach on the coastal side. So an incredible trail. I recommend everyone to check it out, walk it, ride it if you haven't already. And we're looking forward to continuing to close more gaps like this in the following years. Next up, the Atlantic Greenway Network in the city of Miami Beach. So this beach walk was actually already previously designated by the East Coast Greenway Alliance. It was not a new designation per se, but what it was a huge upgrade and renovation. You can see on the right there that beautiful tile brick, extremely wide path. This north section was the final section that was brought up to this new renovated standard, and it's a beautiful trail right in Miami Beach, heart of South Florida. And actually, with this final segment completed, the Greenway is now completely done from north to south in the city limits of the city of Miami Beach. So that's a huge achievement. There's not too many areas where we can say the Greenway is completely built out like that. So definitely want to shine a light on that. And there's a lot of happenings in South Florida, both in the city of Miami, West Palm Beach. There's a lot of really exciting stuff going on. So this is a great a highlight, a celebration, and we look forward to more of this coming out soon. So, as I mentioned earlier, this year we had something very unique. We've had usually several through riders, people that do the entire route on their bicycles. usually every year, either going from Maine to Florida or from south to north. But this past year, for the first time ever, we had our first ever Greenway runner. So that is right. This gentleman right here, his name is Shan Riggs, and that's his partner, Joshua Grant. He ran the entire length of the trail in 78 days, meaning on average, he ran 40 miles a day for 78 days straight to complete the entire route. He did take 2 rest days, but I think he earned those. And what's also incredible about his trip, he was completely supported by his partner, Josh, on a bike with a trailer. So there was no van, there was no support vehicle. They did the entire trip under people power, and it's really amazing. There had never been a trip like this before. It got a ton of media coverage. They did it as a fundraiser to raise awareness for the East Coast Greenway Alliance. And spoiler alerts at my last bullet point shows here, after being together nonstop for 78 days, this incredible journey, at the finish line, Shan dropped to his knee and proposed to Josh, and she said yes. So really an incredible story, one for the history books, I would say. They've inspired a whole new legion of through trekkers, mostly cyclists. We actually right now in the northern US have our first ever gentleman who's attempting to complete the ride on a unicycle, a 36-inch wheel touring unicycle. So this really was an incredible trip that inspired a lot of folks, and we want to hold it up because it was an amazing journey, but also because it showed that this trip, this route, the East Coast Greenway, isn't just about cyclists. Obviously, that's a large part of what we do, but there's also people on foot and people, other users of the trail, and following along with their journey with Shan, from his point of view and from the viewpoint of someone on 2 legs instead of 2 wheels, really was eye-opening for the East Coast Greenway and how we do our route, but also showing that it's for everyone. And with that, I have a short video. Their words tell it better than I could, and certainly a video is worth 1,000,000 pictures if a picture is worth 1,000 words. One moment here, and let me cue this up. And hopefully this works for everyone. We did try it before the meeting, and it went out okay. So just to bear with me here. All right. Can everyone hear that? The audio video is working?
Shan Riggs is logging thousands of miles, running from the Florida Keys, heading all the way up the East Coast Greenway to the Canadian border in Maine.
Riggs began his journey on April 16th in Key West, Florida, with the goal of running 40 miles a day.
The ultra-marathon runner from Connecticut is on a mission to be the first known runner to make it across the entire East Coast Greenway.
I don't want to drive 2,000 miles, let alone
That's
run.
true.
I often get asked, why are we doing this and kind of what's the point? And one, obviously we wanted to support the Greenway and the Alliance and their mission, but what prompted it is we just wanted to see if it's something we could do. We're physically capable of doing something like this. How can you do something like this? And, how do you get up day after day, 40 miles a day, every day for almost 3 months? And I always tell everybody, it just takes practice and the body can get used to anything. And that's true. I'm not just making that up. After a while, your body will pretty much get used to anything.
Well, we got into, I guess, sort of a routine, figuring out a few days ahead of time how many miles we might go each day, sort of based on where we would stay. Sometimes we had people reach out to us and offer their guest room. Other times we look for motels. But that certainly was one of the most challenging parts of the trip, was the planning.
There's the overarching, it's just hard every day, and it's that encompassing, trying not to think of all of it all at once, or it just gets overwhelming. We'd wake up 4:30 in the morning, try to get on the road 5:30. Every day was somewhere between 30 and 50 miles, on an average around 40. Josh would follow behind not too far, and usually around 15 to 20 miles we'd eat breakfast. So that was typically around 9 a.m. or so. A lot of diner food, a lot of huge double meal diner food. And then from there, it would kind of depend, another 15-ish miles, maybe grab a sandwich somewhere. And during the week, Josh is usually somewhere trying to find a place to work and take meetings and things like that, and I would try to finish the day. If it was a weekend, then Josh was riding her bike nearby, and we'd kind of do it that way and finish 3 o'clock, and then try to rest, find a huge meal. It'll be nice to get back home and have a salad instead of the whatever we could grab on the road kind of food for forever.
So all of the people who we met who were really passionate about the trails, it just kind of showed that everybody uses these trails, and it's really important to kind of maintain them and to connect as many of them as we can, which is exactly what the East Coast Greenway is all about. Being on it and seeing firsthand was just really kind of a highlight, I guess, of the trip.
My favorite just part of the whole thing was all the people that came out and supported us, ran with us, biked with us, donated to the Alliance, gave us a place to stay, and it was just one after another. Like every single day there were strangers and people we just met. I mean, Josh and I were trying to reminisce on all the people we've met, and it's going to be impossible to try to thank everybody.
Most of the lows were related to the conditions that I had to deal with the bike and the trailer. So sandy roads, there were a couple of trails that were a bit challenging. There were a few rainy days that were kind of a challenge too, but there weren't too many tough times, so it was pretty easy to just kind of keep pushing through because all the rest of it was actually really fun.
And then there was one specific difficult moment that it was just 2-3 days ago. The Down East Sunrise Trail in Maine, the first 10 miles of that, I hadn't put bug spray on, and that was a huge mistake. And I was just getting completely tormented by flies and mosquitoes, and unfortunately I also had to go to the bathroom in the woods, and so I'm sweating and I'm trying to go really quick, and then I'm throwing my pants down and I grab a tree, and as I'm going I lean back and the tree breaks off and falls on top of me, and I'm getting bare-assed eaten by mosquitoes, and I'm like, oh my god, how do I clean myself up? It was just so. And I called Josh in a crying fit. I'm like, oh my god, I'm just She thought a tree had fallen on me, like, and injured me. She brought bug spray, and that helped a lot. Something that lasts 78 days it's hard to wrap your head around. If my 23-year-old self could have seen what my 43-year-old self was doing, it would just be mind-blowing. I have a question for you.
Oh my god!
I don't know if I can get up.
Yeah! Congratulations!
Did you expect Shan to pop the big question?
No, I did not. I especially didn't expect him to go down on a knee, knowing that he'd have to get back up again.
Get out of here!
So it's exceptional to be able to be fortunate to have a body that could do it and be able to have the time and have a partner like Josh who wants to do these crazy things. and so it's kind of whoa.
So that was the story of Josh and Shan. For those that didn't see it, let me pull my presentation back up here. Truly an incredible, inspirational story of what people are capable of, and obviously a very happy ending at the end there as well. Just one moment. Okay, my screen should be back now. Yes. So kind of to put a bow on the presentation before we go into the question and answer session. This last slide, Greenways for All. This picture is the Miami Underline in South Florida. But Shan and Josh really were inspirational for so many, and they had an incredible long distance journey, but they also really did a lot to show that the Greenway isn't just for ultra marathoners or hardcore touring cyclists. It's for everyone. Children, families, the elderly, people with disabilities, people commuting to work, people on their lunch breaks. And so this slide is actually going to be our next big initiative that we're pushing out through the East Coast Greenway, through our channels, our website, a national push for increased access and accessibility for the Greenway, more funding to help complete this trail, and really showing that this trail is for everyone. The Greenway is for all. So look for more from that to come from our website. I have to give a huge thank you and shout out to our communications team who shot that video and put it together. They're incredibly good at what they do. You can visit our website or our YouTube page. They have many other videos that they've made. They did come down to Florida several times this year for some of the ribbon cuttings and designations, and they put together some great shorter, like 1 minute, 2 minute videos about those events. But they are really powerful stories, and messaging getting out is really an amazing thing that they do and add value to for the Greenway. So with that, here is some more information about our website, about our organization. Here's my contact information. Feel free to email me, or we can set up a phone call if you prefer. I'm happy to provide that as well. But really, I want to take this moment before we go to any questions to just thank all of you for being here today, and for all the partners and collaborators that aren't on this call. Thank you, because the East Coast Greenway Alliance is a nonprofit, and we get funding from individuals as well as foundation grants, corporate support, and events, like I mentioned the fundraiser before. But really, we could not do the work that we do without all of the help and support, not just financially, but of all of our partners in Florida. I mentioned some of them before. I don't want to start listing people off in case I forget someone, but thank you to all of the agencies, organizations, and individuals that help work together to make this dream of the East Coast Greenway a reality. So with that, I believe that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to take any and all questions about anything I talked about today, or stuff that I didn't. Anything in your local area, questions about things we have for next year. Katie, I'll hand it off to you. Do we have any questions come up?
Thanks, Robert. That was a really great presentation. We don't have anything in the chat so far. And while we're waiting for folks to kind of get their questions together, I did have a couple that popped up in my head while I was watching that video. Do you have any particular greenways in your area that you like to get out on? Yes, absolutely. So I travel all over the state for my work with the Greenway. I'm based in Central Florida, so I'm pretty accessible, both to the north, the Florida-Georgia border, Fernandina Beach, Jacksonville, and then also to the south, Miami and the Keys, and everything in between. But the closest
Greenway segment that I am local to is in Titusville and the East Central Regional Rail Trail, which is actually part of that River to Sea loop that I mentioned that goes on continuously for 50 miles. It's also, Titusville is a trail town with the state, so they've totally embraced the Greenway in their area. They're also the eastern terminus of the Florida Coast to Coast Trail. So really some beautiful, kind of away from the busier cities and from the beach towns, but more shaded, you know, natural Florida. And I try and make it out there almost every weekend for some longer rides and some more mileage. But there's so many great examples all over the state. That just happens to be the one closest to home for me.
Awesome. So we did get a couple of questions in from Doug Alderson. What are the next big ribbon cuttings in Florida?
That's a great question. So there is a lot of projects programmed out for 2023. In Miami, the Underline Trail is having its second anniversary in February, and then phase 2 of their trail is slated to be completed in summer or possibly fall of 2023. So there definitely will be a big celebration and ribbon cutting for that. In Jacksonville, actually, possibly even this year, but it could potentially be in spring of 23. The Fuller Warren Bikes I-95 highway goes over the river there, and there actually is a fully built bicycle pedestrian bridge actually separate from the highway that is almost completely done. I know there's been some problems with sourcing some of the materials, but that one has been in the pipeline for a long time, and I think it's almost ready to be done. And we definitely will be doing a big celebration and ribbon cutting for that, because bridges are huge pieces of infrastructure. They're very expensive. They take a very long time. And we definitely want to celebrate this, connecting outer neighborhoods to the downtown core of Jacksonville. There's another of other segments that are slated to at least begin construction in 23. There's also a number of Sun Trail programs that are under construction in next year. And I can go more into those in detail with you offline. There's also a very excellent list of the next 5 years on the Florida Department of Transportation's website under the Sun Trail program. So I definitely encourage you to look at that. But the easiest way to stay on top of ribbon cuttings at events happening is to connect with us either on social media or join. We do send out an e-newsletter monthly that has happenings all over the nation, not just in Florida, but anything that is coming up in Florida will be in that messaging. So definitely follow along. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening, and it's definitely a really good time for trails in Florida.
So our next question comes from Elizabeth Schreiber. Do you work with any trails in Gainesville?
So no, the East Coast Greenway is primarily focused, actually completely focused on the East Coast of Florida and the US. So we basically follow the Atlantic coast. That being said, we do lift up, you know, other trail systems. It is great. Part of this Greenways for All messaging, you know, does involve trails in other parts of the state and country. So our work is focused with the completion of the East Coast Greenway Alliance, but we are very much tied into a lot of the other trail advocacy organizations, such as the Office of Greenways and Trails throughout the state and throughout the country. And certainly, as an individual, I'm also excited just to see trails built anywhere. So.
Speaking of trails, do you have any particular favorite trails that you like to get out and explore, whether it's near where you live or within the state?
Yeah, again, there's so many. I don't want to make, you know, anyone upset that I didn't include them, but I do, as I travel to meetings across the state, I do try and bring my bike with me. I am a cyclist, but I can't always do that. But at the very least, to get out and walk and see, you know, trails on the ground really helps to give a sense of talking about this larger route that is made up of individual segments. So some highlights for me, the Spring to Spring Trail, actually, that connects to the East Central Regional Trail in DeBary in Central Florida is beautiful. It passes by several state parks and natural springs. Blue Springs you can actually swim in when the manatees aren't there. In North Florida, the Amelia Island Parkway and the Timaquin Trails There is a segment that's under construction now that actually should be completed next year. And when that's done, you'll be able to go almost continuously for about 20 miles through, again, alongside the Atlantic Ocean, through state parks. And it's really just beautiful scenery. North Florida, the weather is usually a little less muggy. It's a great spot. And of course, the Overseas Heritage Trail in the Florida Keys is another, kind of showcase trail. It is mile zero. It is the end or the beginning of the East Coast Greenway, depending on which way you go. It's not complete yet, but it is, almost 80 miles of trail going throughout the entire Florida Keys. The eventual goal is for all 100+ miles to be completely trail. So definitely that is one worth checking out as well. But there's great trails all over the state. The best trail might be the one that's in your backyard, the one that you can go out the most often. Not every trip to the Greenway has to be one of these amazing complete through treks of it. The trail that you use is the best trail for you, I'd say.
Thanks, Robert. And I wanted to read a message from Kelly with the Florida Bicycle Association. She'd just like to express how encouraging it is to be reminded of all the progress that's been made and hear about the initiatives moving forward. The statewide Florida Bicycle Association will continue to support this work, and she's looking forward to working and connecting soon with you, Robert, and other partners to collaborate.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
And then I have a question from Gil Williams. And Gil, I think this might be a good question for our webinar next month, but I'll go ahead and read it out just in case anybody on the call knows this or would like to chime in. Do you know anyone that has paddled from Silver Springs to the Atlantic?
So I don't, and again, the Office of Greenways and Trails actually has their great Blueways network. I don't personally know anyone, but sort of along the same lines as the Greenways for All, and lifting up all trails and all greenways. We actually have in the past partnered with Blueways as well. I think it was in 2017 or so, maybe earlier, as before I was with the organization. But we actually had a huge event called the River Relays, connecting local greenway areas with their Blueways as a partnership and fundraiser, and there were races as well. But I know there were some of those in Florida, but I like to paddle on my own. I have a tandem kayak and a paddleboard, but I personally haven't made that journey. Maybe someone else on the call can speak to that.
But we will be hearing from the Florida Paddling Trails Association next month, Gil. So I think that would be a great time to ask that question. So our next question from Lucine Martins. I am interested in the East Coast Greenway, how it evolved historically speaking. And then are you familiar with the road called Atlantic Beach Boulevard that ran down the east coast of Florida? They have found some old right-of-way documents on this road.
That sounds like an interesting piece of Florida history. I'm not familiar. I'm assuming that predates A1A. The East Coast Greenway, so I alluded a little bit to our origins at the beginning of the presentation, but it was founded in the early 90s, and it originally was kind of just a pipe dream of some urban planners, specifically in the Northeast. So the original idea that I understand was to connect New York City to Boston, two of the most populous, busy cities in the country, and to make it accessible for people without having to drive. And that kind of was the kernel and the core of the Greenway's mission and idea, as opposed to some other groups that are more about, going off-road and finding different kind of, single track and more exploratory routes. The East Coast Greenway has always been about cities, peoples, and places. So rather than avoiding the busiest places, making those places usable for everyone, not just people in cars. And that's been the mission since the beginning. Over time, as more and more excitement and interest for the idea and the organization grew, the route kind of progressed kind of naturally to encompass the entire Atlantic coast, the East Coast, obviously. And in Florida, the South, as the organization grew, became more and more capacity to have staff to advocate and work with these locations. So Florida, the East Coast Greenway in Florida has been a priority and very active for at least the past 15 years. We've had some sort of permanent staff attached to that, and we have a long history of working with both the Office of Greenways and Trails, the DEP, the Florida Department of Transportation, and the state government. But I will have to do some digging about Atlantic Beach Boulevard. I'm not familiar with that specifically.
Thanks, Robert. And it doesn't look like we have any more questions, so we can go ahead and wrap things up. I just want to say thanks again, Robert, for that presentation. And thank you to everyone who joined in. I'll be sending out a survey after this, so keep an eye out for that. A recording of this webinar will also go out in the next few days. Next month's webinar, we'll be hearing from the Florida Paddling Trails Association. You can sign up on our website, and I'll also include a link to sign up in the email I'll send out later today. If you have any questions in the meantime, please email us at Office of Greenways and Trails at floridadep.gov. And thanks again, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Take care, everyone.